Still on the eagle. Going to be on the eagle for the next few weeks. You might wonder what this has to do with the eagle, but before I conclude, I think you'll know. Is everybody there? Verse 14, and Absalom and all the men of Israel said, the counsel of Hushai the Archite is better than the counsel of Ahithophel. For the Lord had appointed to defeat the good counsel of Ahithophel, to the intent that the Lord might bring evil upon Absalom. Then said Hushai to Zadok and to Abiathar the priest, thus and thus did Ahithophel counsel Absalom and the elders of Israel, and thus have I counseled. Now therefore send quickly and tell David, saying, lodge not this night in the plains of the wilderness, but speedily pass over, lest the king be swallowed up, and all the people that are with him. Verse 22 for the sake of time. Then David arose, and all the people that were with him, and they passed over Jordan by the morning light. There lacked not one of them that was not gone over Jordan. Now I want you to look at verse 16, where I'll be preaching from. Now therefore send quickly, and tell David, saying, lodge not this night in the plains of the wilderness, but speedily pass over, lest the king be swallowed up, and all the people that are with him. I want to use for a text tonight, don't let me die in the wilderness. Don't let me die in the wilderness. Now, you might wonder what this has to do with an eagle. But we're going to talk about some of the characteristics of an eagle today. And one of the characteristics of an eagle is its loyalty. And very few of us ever really have a friend, what we call a friend. The Bible said David had a friend by the name of Hushai. And when David was running, fleeing for his life, Absalom and all his men were going to kill him. David hid in the wilderness. He didn't think they knew where he was. But Hushai knew that Absalom and his followers knew where David was. And he said, I've got to get a message to David. Don't lodge in this wilderness. They're going to kill you. But the thing I want you to think about, Hushai was putting his own life in jeopardy by going in that wilderness to get David the message. But the Lord teaches us, as he laid down his life for us, so are we to lay down our lives for one another. And some of the characteristics of an eagle is so awesome. Solomon was the wisest man in the world. And Solomon said there's 4 things that are too wonderful for me to behold. He said one of them is a serpent that's sliding on a rock. He said the second one is a ship that makes its way across the sea. Solomon was awed by the way that a ship would ride the waves and stay on top of the water. He was awed by the way a serpent could move without legs and just get and go. And he said the third thing he said he was awed by was how that a man had his way with the maid, which I'll stay off that. We don't want to get in that today. But he was awed by the way a man had his way with the maid, and he said the way that an eagle makes its way through the heavens. He said it's awesome what an eagle can do. An eagle is considered to be the greatest creature ever created by God outside man. It's mentioned in the scriptures 34 times. The eagle gets its heritage from the hawk and the falcon and the condor and so forth and so on. But it's unique even in its own family. The thing about an eagle that is so honor, that is so awesome, is the honor. There ain't no other bird in the world that has honor like an eagle. No other bird in the world has a heart like the eagle. No other bird in the world has the boldness or the courage as an eagle. No other bird has a habitat like an eagle. No other bird in the world builds its house like an eagle builds it. And that's another message on its own. We could stay there all day today, but I got to move on. No other bird in the world lives like an eagle lives, or walks like an eagle walks. It's a unique bird. It's a special bird, even in the eyes of God. And God has compared himself to an eagle, and he compares us as eagles. He said that he himself would visit his house like an eagle does its nest. And how many in here has ever been in the Boy Scout? All right? In the famous Boy Scout, the highest rank that you can get in the Boy Scout is what? An Eagle Scout. In the United States military, the United States Air Force, the most supreme, the most superior bomber plane that they have, you know what it's called? An eagle. An eagle. An eagle is a warrior. An eagle is a survivor. An eagle is strong. And God has placed an eagle in a high position because of the characteristics that it possesses. An eagle actually imitates God, pound for pound and ounce for ounce. There never was a creature ever created that could outdo an eagle. An eagle can carry 10 times its normal weight. It can fly from 135 to 180 miles an hour. It can see 20 miles on a clear day. An eagle is awesome. And one of the characteristics of an eagle, Richard, it won't fly with another bird. It won't fly with a robin. It won't fly with a blue jay. It won't fly with a sparrow. It won't fly with a crow. It'll fly by itself or with another eagle. You know, the Bible teaches us to come out from among the world and have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, and to not be a partaker of their evil deeds. We're either to walk by ourselves or walk with other Christians. We're not to really mingle with worldly people. We witness to them, but we don't mingle with them. But what an eagle will do is an eagle is loyal to its friend. An eagle helps its wife, helps its mate build a home. And it's the only bird in the world that sits on the nest just like the mother eagle does. The father eagle will sit on the nest too. And they'll protect their young ones, and they'll both fight and defend one another and die for one another. And the introduction of this story, Hushai and David. David was willing. Hushai was willing to go where David was and lay down his life in order to save David so that David could be out of danger. See, a lot of times along this way, we'll all get in a place where if we don't get out of, it can be fatal to us. Not just physically, but spiritually. How many's been there? How many's been in that out-of-the-way place? A cold place, in a dying place. And you know that if you stayed there long, something fatal could happen. So Hushai had to help David. The Bible said, he said, don't lodge in the plains of this wilderness. So an eagle, as Hushai, when an eagle sees a brother in trouble, you know, the Bible says in Galatians 6:1, when we see a brother or sister overtaken in a fault, Let you that are spiritual restore such a one in a spirit of meekness, considering your own self. Don't ever think that it couldn't happen to you. You might be walking tall today. You might be feeling good today, but the Bible said, take heed lest you fall. It could be you tomorrow. So we got to be, and the Bible is specific about who helps you. When you see a brother or sister overtaken in the fall, or what I call dying in the wilderness, that's the moral of this message, is you that are spiritual, not just everybody. If we got an accident on the highway, and there ain't no paramedics around, and Brian runs out there and tries to help this guy that's laying here, he could hurt him more than he could help him. You got to know what you're doing. You might make him worse instead of better. That's what happens when a lot of people try to go to somebody when they don't know what they're talking about. You can't. He said, let he that's spiritual restore such a one. And you got to have the right spirit about it. You don't go to them huffing and puffing and condemning them and putting them down. You go to them in the spirit of meekness, considering your own self. Now, when I preached this message the last time, and I'm watching my watch because there's no way I can finish this today, I got a tape off AJ, and I've got a series of tapes off other people, and I've studied the eagle off and on for 10 years. But there was a minister down in Riviera, Georgia. I didn't know his name, but I found it out. I got on the computer and started reading some books, and I actually found out this guy's name. He's dead now, but his name was Bobby Thompson. And he was holding a revival down where Eagle Bluff is. Where's Eagle Bluff? Anybody know? I don't know either. I never could find out. I believe it's in North Carolina, but I want to show. But he was holding a revival down in North Carolina, we'll say, wherever Eagle Bluff's at. And during that revival, there was an old Indian come to one of his meetings. And this Indian's name was Tacoma. Well, Bobby began to preach on these eagles. And after the service was over, Tacoma hollered at him. And he said, you really got my attention tonight by preaching on the eagle. He said, well, I've studied them for over 5 years. He said, that's all I've preached on is the eagle. And Tacoma said, well, I've studied them for 30 years. He said, I'm a caretaker down at Eagle's Bluff. And he said, if you've got time, I would like to take you out there with me. I'd like to show you some things. And Bobby said he was so excited. He said he was all for it. And the old Indian told him, said, 5:30 in the morning, be ready, have your walking shoes on, and said, I'll pick you up at the hotel. And Bobby said he got up early, man, got his shoes on, got ready. 5:30, that old Indian pulled up in a Jeep and said they drove out to the highest place they could get in Eagles Bluff. Said it was about an hour before daylight. And said the old Indian got out a telescope and said they sat there and said about an hour after daylight, they counted 33 eagles. And Bobby said, I've never seen so many eagles in one place at one time in my life. He said, man, he said, I was thrilled to death. And he said, I really started rejoicing and thanking Tacoma for bringing me out there. And he said, Tacoma looked at him and said, well, this ain't what I brought you to see. And he said, it ain't. He said, no. He said, what I brought you to see is down there. And said they looked down, the mountain they was on was almost 3 miles high. And he said, now what I want you to see is at the bottom of this mountain. And he said they had to walk, took them a couple hours to make their way down that mountain. And said when they got to the foot of it, there was a little valley field. And he said there was sagebrush all over the valley field. And said when they got to the edge of the timberline, The old Indian said, stay right here and just watch. And he took that telescope and began to look through it and said they counted 5 eagles that was in that valley field, and said there was every one standing still and had their heads down like their necks was broke. Said their feet was swollen, calcium was upon their beaks, and said their feathers were all broke out. And old Bobby, the preacher, he said those are the worst looking eagles that I've ever seen in my lifetime. AJ, I think, had this tape. I ain't for sure. I believe he's the first one to give it to me. But he said, what's going on with them? And the Indian told him. He said they're going through a molting period. Have you ever heard of a molting period? An eagle will live, the lifespan of an eagle is from 60 to 100 years, the same as a man. But in the middle years of that eagle, it'll go through a state, it'll go through a period of what's called the molting period, where it loses its desire to fly. It loses its desire to fight. It loses its desire to live. And when it starts going into what I call depression, and every one of us periodically will end up in this shape. We'll end up, we call it the middle-age syndrome, old age crisis. We get there. We get there. And when the eagles get there, they start making their way off the mountain and down in the valley because they want to hide. They're really ashamed of what you see about them, and they want to hide. Well, will sin make you hang your head? See, old preacher said, what's going, those eagles all had their heads down. Sin will make you hide your face. Sin, it'll keep you from looking people in the eye. There's a shame about sin. Have you ever, well, I know we have. We've done things, but we'd rather just get off by ourselves and not talk to nobody or look at nobody because we're ashamed of what we done, and we wanted to just hide. Like Adam and Eve, when they sinned in the beginning, what did they do? They run and hid. These eagles go down into the valley, and they try to hide because they're ashamed of what's happening to them. The old Indian told the preacher, he said, preacher, walk over and pick one of those eagles up. And that preacher said, now, Tacoma, I know enough about eagles to know that a weak eagle will hurt you and hurt you bad. And Tacoma said, that eagle won't hurt you. It's too nigh death. And he said that he went over and he picked that eagle up. And Tacoma said, look in its eyes. And he said he looked in its eyes, and its eyes were all scaled over. Tacoma said it's the nature of an eagle to cry. Its eyes automatically make water. That's how it keeps such a clear vision. Its eyes are never dry. He said, look in its eyes. They're dry and they're scaly. And he said, well, what's wrong? He said, it's lost its desire to live. It's lost its burden for others. It's lost that which nature had put into it to help others and fight for itself. Said it's lost that. You see, it's in an eagle's nature to weep. And to be honest with you, it's in a Christian's nature to weep. The Bible said when Jesus looked out over Jerusalem, the city that God loved, he wept. He said, I called unto it, and I tried to call it to me like a hen does its bidding, but it would not come. And he wept because they would not come to God. And Jeremiah said, my eyes and my head was as a fountain of tears as he wept over Jerusalem. And people that don't cry anymore, they don't weep anymore. They've lost their burden. They've lost that characteristic that we ought to have, that love for one another and the urgency to help one another and reach out. We don't cry over anybody no more. We don't cry over anything. We can lose a loved one and not shed one tear. Because we don't have the burden that we ought to have. We don't have the affection for one another that we ought to have. We don't have that brotherly love that Jesus was talking about. We get a brother or sister in trouble, you know what we do? We get a stones. We get a rope. We start talking about them. We start putting them down. They're sinking anyway, so we just jump on them and push them right on down. Instead of going to them in love and in the spirit of meekness and trying to restore them. I'm glad if I do go back, I hope that I got a brother in this church that'll come to me and say, I won't let you die in this wilderness. I hope that somebody has enough effect, no matter what I've done, no matter what I've went through, and I'll be the same way with you. I'll come to you and say, you can't die like this. You can't die here. You got to get out of this wilderness. You see, David got in a place where he thought God was going to take his spirit from him. And David began to cry before God. David's the one that said, weeping endure for a night, but joy's coming in the morning. We weep now, we suffer now, we struggle now, but joy's coming in the morning. But David got in a dilemma, Richard, where he thought God was going to take his spirit from him. And you know what David said? David said, bottle up my tears. Put them in thy bottle. Psalms 56 and 8, he didn't say put them in a bottle. He said put them in thy bottle. And he said, remember me. Write my name in thy book. So no matter what I've done, you'll always remember me. He wanted God to have something to remember him by. In the old times, it was the ancient custom. Like Larry was dying. He was a friend of mine. I'd take a bottle and I would catch Larry's tears. And I would keep them tears as a memorial. And then the family that cried over him, they could catch their tears. And they would put their bottle in the tomb with Larry, showing our affection one for another. You see, I don't know how many tears that you've cried. I don't know how many bottles God's got in heaven with your tears in them. But I can say this. The first tear that ever fell, God caught it. It's there. The first song that you ever sung, God has got it. The first sermon I ever preached, God's got it wrote down. David said in the 9th verse of the same chapter, God knows my wanderings. He said, I can't turn from the left to the right of the night. What God don't know it. God monitors our life. He knows everything that we do. And he said, God, catch my tears and write my name in your book and remember me. But the Bible says that God done more than that. He put your name in the palm of his hand. He's engraved it in the palm of his hand. He'll never forget your work of labor. We lose our burden. I'm going to close. How long has it been since you cried over somebody? How long has it been since you cared enough? We say we love people. We'll say a 2-minute prayer and not shed no tears and get up and walk away. The Bible said when Jesus went to the graveside of Lazarus, he wept. You know what the Jews said? Oh, how he loved him. Weeping comes from a broken heart. Remember when you first got saved? Was your heart broke? You spirit contrite? Did you cry before God? Weepings went out of style. I ain't seen no tears on nobody's face in a long time. If you do cry, you're crying for yourself. Like Larry said, you're drowned and ain't nobody drowning with you, so you won't cry about it. You're going through the fire and ain't nobody else getting burnt, so you won't cry about it. But anyway, I'll try to just put this in segments and take a little bit of time, but I had to get it all out to make my point. And he said they backed up in the trees. They set that eagle back down. And they backed up in the trees, and he said he waited. He said, I want to show you something. He said, if you think you was blessed up there, he said he started shouting on top of the rock. I almost went over the cliff. Tacoma had to get between him and the cliff when he seen all them eagles come out together, and they were all crying and praising God, and there's a lot to that, and I'll get on to it later on. But he said they backed up in the trees, and he said they had this telescope, and he said they focused in on the top of the mountain. And he said at the top of the timberline, there was 8 eagles in a circle. And he said they were all circling the top of that mountain. And Tacoma told him, said, I want you to look at these 8 eagles. He said, you'll notice one thing about them. They're all old eagles. There ain't no young eagles with them. And he said, I want you to notice something else. He said, every one of them's got something in their claws. You see, because those 5 that was in the wilderness, they couldn't defend for themselves. They couldn't see. They couldn't walk. They couldn't fight. They were dying. Unless somebody got to them, they wasn't going to make it. How many of us got family and friends on alcohol, drugs, or in some other kind of perverted lifestyle, and if some of us don't get to them, they ain't going to make it. They're dying in the wilderness, and we don't love them enough to even go in at them. We don't love them enough to even invite them to church, to call them on the phone and tell them we're in revival. We won't walk across the yard to tell our family that they need Jesus in their life. But yet you got the characteristics of an eagle. When they saw these 8 eagles, he said, look in their claws. They every one had meat in their claws. And the preacher said, what are they going to do? He said, just sit right here and watch. And he said they flew around that valley field. And he said each one of them eagles, Richard, would come down to that one that was sick, that one that was dying, that one that couldn't fight for itself or defend for itself. And it would drop that meat right in front of that eagle. And the preacher said, what are they doing? He said they're trying to get them to eat. And when they dropped that meat, they would scream and they would cry and they would fly and catch the awful shine everywhere. And the preacher kept saying, what's going on? He said they're trying to get them to eat. He said they're telling them, don't die in this wilderness. He said all 8 of them eagles have been here before. I'm the caretaker. I know each and every one of these eagles. They've all been there. They've all been near death, just like you are. And they've come to the rescue, trying to get them to eat and begging them and encouraging them to eat this meat and climb that mountain and get back on top where they belong. And they just kept circling and dropping that meat. And said finally one of the eagles began to eat a little bit. Then he said there was another one started to eat a little bit. Now I'm going to close. I can't. I'll have to pick up Wednesday night. I don't want to hold you too long at a time. But the first one that started to eat, sat out for about 20 minutes, he started moving a little bit. Hadn't moved since it'd been there. Said his head was still down, his feathers was all broke, his feet were swollen. He was wounded. He was near death. You don't know how close some of ours are to death. But we can look at them and go our merry way. But yet God says, you're an eagle. And you're an eagle. And I'm talking to myself too, that we look at them that's on drugs and on dope, family and friends, and we'll watch them walking the road just lying under covers and in ditch lines. And Richard, they grin like idiots because they're blind. They don't know. They have no life. And we drive right on by, and we don't even tell them what Jesus can do for them. But that one began to eat a little bit. And he said when he began to eat a little bit, he began to move. And he said he got into a place where there was some sunshine coming between the trees. How many knows that an eagle's revived by the natural force of the sun? They are. And this eagle got in the sunlight and said he just stood in the sunlight and said all of a sudden, Larry said he started moving his wings and he was trying to flap his wings and he started scratching a little bit on the ground and said the other eagle said he started making his way. He started moving a little bit and said he got over in the sun and said he started doing the same thing because they'd felt something that they had never felt in a while. They felt the power and the force of the sun, and he said they stayed there for just a little while longer. And old Bobby, the preacher, he said, I got to get back. I got to preach tonight. Am I boring you? Well, I can't cut it short. I got to tell it like I studied it. But he said, I got to get back. So they went back to the church, and he said about 2 days later, I'll close. I'll pick up on it Wednesday night. It hinders me because I know y'all don't like long preaching. I know a lot of you don't. I can tell by your expression. But anyway, about 2 days went by, and old Tacoma called him again. He said, preacher, he said, can you go out with me this morning? He said, yeah. He said, I ain't got nothing to do. He said, I'll pick you up about the same time. He said, okay. He said, what happened to them eagles? He said, I'll pick you up and I'll tell you about it. Well, he picked him up and said they drove back out and got their telescope out and they sat there. Said right after daylight, there was this one eagle. Said he flew in on a rock and said the sun started coming up and he got in that sun and said he started scratching. Look at me. Don't look at the people. Look at me. He started scratching on that rock, raking his beak over that rock, and said he started squalling and screaming and looking up to heaven. And he said, now, preacher, look at his eyes. And he said he looked in his eyes, and he said the water was coming off his eyes, and his whole chest was wet with water. And the preacher said, what is he doing? He said he's praising God that he did not die in that wilderness, and said he just kept shouting and screaming and squawking and praising God, and said about 20 minutes that old eagle stood in that sun and then said he was just standing there like this. He said, what's he doing? He said he's waiting on the wind. And the wind's the Holy Ghost, typified the Holy Ghost. And said, and just about 20 more minutes went by, and said all of a sudden that old eagle began to soar. And he said, we was watching him, and the preacher said, what's he going to do now? He said he's going to hunt him some meat. He said, because that one, he named this, and he said this one was named Panicking. He said, how do you know his name? He said, I watched him grow up. He said, I've named all these eagles. He said, that's old Panikin. Said, he made it up the mountain yesterday morning. He made it to the top. But he said, the other little eagle is just about halfway. And he said, Panikin's getting ready to catch him some meat and fly back down to where he's at and say, you can climb that mountain. You can make it back. I'm going to help you. I'll be here. I'll bring meat to you. I'll help you back up this mountain. I'll help you to the top to where you can fly again and soar again. That's what we are to be to one another. You say you're a friend? Be a friend. Don't be intimidated about what this Holy Ghost crowd's going to think. Go to them, Adam. If I had one in a bar room, I'd walk in there. I've went and got mine before. I don't care what others got to say about it. We've lost that affection. We can't let them die in the wilderness. I'm going to pick back up. I'm going to have to close. He said, what happened to the other three? There was 5 in that valley field. He said, the other 3, I buried them. He said, that makes 27 graves down in this bluff. And he said, I've got crosses on every one of them. He said, that didn't make it back out. And he said they could have if they would have only eat the meat. He said, but they couldn't eat the meat. And they died in the wilderness. You see, it's going to take some strong word to keep us. I know we've got opposition, we've got challenges, we've got an adversary, we've got a devil that's coming against us every day. But here's the thing about it. God didn't put weakness in none of you. He never put weakness in none of you. The Bible said, greater is he that's in us than he that's in the world. Did he not say, let the strong bear the infirmities of the weak? How many feels like you're among the strong today? Huh? Have you interceded? How about all these weak members? Make any kind of excuse you want to. We got members that won't come to church once a month. They can't tell me they're not weak. They're weak. We ought to pray for them. I know you just go to them, provoke them, get mad, but pray for them. Intercede for them. Get down by your bed of the night. Call their name out. Let God deal with them. They're weak. They need our prayer. Let the strong bear the infirmity of the weak. You know what the eagle says? He said, you're not heavy. You're my brother. A sparrow or a blue jay, they can't carry nothing but a crumb or a worm, but an eagle can pick another eagle up and pack it back to the rock. He can pack it back to the top, and it ain't no burden for him. You're not heavy. You're my brother. These characteristics that I'm talking about, we need to develop this kind of character in our life, Ollie. Only the strong is going to survive. You're an eagle. You're meat eaters. You're not going to die. How many know somebody? Come on, Cal, y'all get your song. How many know somebody in a place right now, they need you? Huh? Be honest. They need you. They need you to call them. They need you to go to them. They need you to visit them. They need you to pray for them. You can help them. But you need God to give you the strength to do it. Why don't you be that one that saves that one that's down? The Bible says, consider them that are in bondage, that are sick and afflicted, as it being your own self. I'm going to open this altar up today. I don't know what you need to pray for or who you need to pray for. But I know one thing. Intercession is something we've got away from. I got a brother sick, dying of cancer. Brian's got a daddy sick. We can't pray too much for him, Brian. God honors them that honors him. Coming to God, that's praising him, Quincy. Just coming and asking him to do something that man can't do, that's praise. That's praise to God. Knowing that all things are possible with God.
Is this the town called Jerusalem? I'm a stranger and I'm lost. I heard they took a man called Jesus and they nailed him to a cross. They say that the blood flowed from his side until it stained that rugged old tree. And no, he didn't even know my name. They said he died for me. So show me the way to Calvary. I want to see him face to face. And I'd like to thank you for caring enough that he would want to take my place. And I'd like to kneel beneath that old cross, and I'll thank him for setting me free. It's the only way to Jesus. Show me the way